Hey everyone, this is Mayan Gordon. We are back live at 5, and we have another very special guest today. His name is Keith Tillman. But before I have him introduce himself, I would love for you guys to do the usual. What is one thing that you guys are grateful for today? And where in the world are you watching from? I think one of the beautiful things about all of these platforms, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, which we're broadcasting to all of those right now, is that we're all over the world and we're still able to connect with each other in a really profound and meaningful way. So, without further ado, Keith, could you go ahead and kind of introduce yourself a little bit and tell people really what are you all about? What is, what makes you you and what do you care about?
Okay, great. So let me just start off by saying, I can't think of a better place to be on a Friday night here on the East Coast than live with you here on LinkedIn and whoever else decides to spend their time uh, watching us do what we do. Engage in a conversation that's unscripted, unrehearsed, and hopefully it'll have a meaningful impact on someone. But I would say the core of who I am is I have three daughters, um, and I have a son and one stepson. And I've been married for 16 years, so the core of who I am now is centered around them. But I would say the backbone of that core started to form when I was 17 years old. So
That's beautiful. Everyone watching this who's seen this show before knows that family is something really important to me. What is up? Going to give a couple shout outs. Neil watching us here. We also got a LinkedIn user from Australia. Joshua, who's grateful for his family and their health, is coming in from Texas. Oh, Joshua also says, thank you for your service, Keith. Absolutely. You guys, myself and everyone kind of watching typically who's a fan of me and watches my content knows that I am a huge supporter of anyone who's a part of military service, anyone who serves and makes sacrifice for the greater good of our country. We also got Rena Friedman. Thank you so much for watching, you guys. That's amazing. So Keith, take me back to 17. What was going on in your life back then, and kind of what got you into the military?
okay, so I would say so after 19 years of military service, and I'm hoping to make it to 20. 19 years of service, four combat tours, which consist of two 12-month tours to Iraq, one 15-month tour to Iraq, and then one 9-month tour to Afghanistan. I would say a lot of profound moments happened along that journey. But for me, the most profound moment started when I was 17 years old. And I say that because that was the first time that I experienced every emotion humanly possible. Um, and so just for those that are listening that don't know, that moment came when I decided to drop out of high school. Um, and so yeah, that's
So what
that's the
what made you
best way I can
decide
describe it.
to drop out of high school? And then why do you think that that was the moment where you felt all of those emotions? What about dropping out kind of made you experience that?
So I come from a small town from the South, Mississippi. And in that town, it's probably about 2,500 people. A small high school of which I think is about 300 now currently. Not sure what it was back when I was going because that was some time ago. But in the South, if you've ever been to the South, and I know you're from the West, so but in the
I
South,
have never been
sports,
to Mississippi, so yeah, tell me about
yeah.
it.
so so in the South, people unite with two things. Uh, that's food and sports. That's what brings people together. And I would say the most impactful sport is football. And so when you're in a town that that is small like mine, the only thing going on Friday nights and what people look forward to is high school football. And so I would say my journey was kind of cliche in a sense of being a high school quarterback that played at somewhat of a high level. People gravitated toward me for that. And so what was profound was I didn't understand um, that those people who gravitated toward me because of being a high school quarterback, I didn't understand their expectation that came with that. So that was the first time I experienced uh, people wanting to be around me, but not actually seeing me for who I was, just for what I did necessarily. So I don't know if that makes sense,
Absolutely.
but
No, that
yeah,
absolutely makes sense. Is that something that you realized when you dropped out and kind of
right.
did people drop you? Is that kind of what happened?
Yeah, and so I share that because that's really what um, led to this moment of, oh wow, I'm not who people made me think I was. And so as a young kid, the hardest thing for a kid my age at that time is to figure out who you are, and
Absolutely.
to figure out you know where you fit in, and what you're all about. So for a young male, such as I was, I thought who I was the high school quarterback. That was my identity. And so, but doing that process, I got caught up too much in that identity, and I let my academics fall to the wayside. So what was most important, or what should have been most important, was kind of put on the back burner. And so I had this what some would consider um, a great junior year, because we had an undefeated football team, and and the town had rallied around us. Everything we did was just great, and everybody felt special. But me losing sight, losing focus in academics, that caused me to be ineligible for my senior year. And so the unfortunate thing, though, is instead of having the kind of leadership in place, and I say leadership in the education realm or the academic realm, to influence me to come back, they kind of discouraged me from coming back. And so, as a kid, like I said, that I experienced frustration, anger, depression, anxiety. I went through every emotion um, possible, losing that identity that so many people had made me feel like I was. So,
So then how did you move on from that and kind of what happened next in your life?
well, it took me a while to move on from that. Um, I think when people experience failure, a couple different things happen to you. Number one, you either develop a fear of failure because you don't want to ever experience that again, and it drives you to never put yourself in that situation again, or um, it puts you in a state of mind where failure is normal, and so instead of avoiding failure, you kind of experience failure over and over again,
You
and
almost
to the point
expect it.
you expect it. Yeah. And so it changes your mentality. And I would say for several years, my mentality was damaged because of that one single point of failure. And so failure over and over again became acceptable, to the point where um, I began to self-destruct, and all the things that come with self-destructing is very real. And um, so you start to abuse alcohol, you start to abuse drugs, you hang with people that have no vision to, or no ambition to succeed. It's just to cover up emotion. And so that became me, um, until one day I just kind of had enough of it and changed my mindset. And that's what I'm hoping to share with people today is, just how I went through that mindset shift and turned that pain kind of recycle that pain, turn that pain into energy to drive me.
Yeah, absolutely. Was that so when you went through that process of shifting your mindset from, failure being not only acceptable, but really normal and kind of expected and almost a part of who you were to not something that you would accept any longer, was that something that in the moment you were actively aware of and being intentional about, or was it driven by an outside force or something that maybe you weren't quite as aware of?
That's a great question. No, I was not intentional about it. Um, I think what was a blessing for me is I come from a good family. And so even when, I wasn't believing in myself, I had family members that encouraged me and believed in me, didn't give up on me. But most of all, I had friends, uh, real friends that were in college. They had a structured life, and my getaway was to go visit them and just kind of be involved in their life. And so having that, in addition to a strong family, um, really gave me a an idea of, okay, this is how I can start to change the things that I'm doing. So it was
Yeah, no,
influence.
I can totally understand and relate to that. I think,
Yeah.
for me, I've experienced also a lot of changes in my life, from definitely not as something so I'd say severe as because I wasn't as good, but I was, I played basketball all my life growing up, and I
Right
was on
on.
a team that went to state every year. My,
Yeah.
my basketball coach was the most winningest coach in Washington State history for women's
Oh wow.
basketball, and demanded a lot from us. And when I ended up not being up to the standard that really, the coach and the team required, I went through a period of self-destruction where I started
Yeah.
going to stores and stealing for fun.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
started, yeah, smoking a lot of weed, kind of not caring as much about really
Yeah.
anything, because all I had cared about was basketball. And it
Yeah.
was something that I not only had my identity tied up in, but it's where my positive emotions had come from. Like winning at a sport is such a thrilling experience, especially when you
It
do it
is.
with a team. There's something so magical, and great about working with a team to achieve a goal like that, to beat other
Yeah.
teams, especially when it's hard. When those teams are good and they're your rivals, there's just so much emotion tied up in that. And when I lost a lot of that because I didn't get to play in the games as much, because I was riding the bench more for not performing well. It definitely took a huge toll on me. And then, going from there into college, where I really didn't have anything that was motivating me. The
Hmm.
environment just wasn't kind of supportive the way in high school. I went to a really great high school that had amazing teachers, kind of amazing people who encouraged and cared about me. And in college, I didn't have that. Like, no one cared
Right.
whether I
Right.
did well or anything like that. And so kind of fell into more of loss of identity of, well, I think I'm really smart. I know I'm really smart, but I'm in this environment where it doesn't seem to matter, or like that it's not really important anymore.
Yeah.
I know that I didn't really get to have a real change in mindset until I surrounded my thoughts, at least, not in person, but started listening to some podcasts,
Mm.
from people who I really respected their success and wanted to be like them, and whose stories like made a lot of logical sense to me. Where when they shared their stories, I was like, that seems real, that makes sense, and that's what I want. And kind of surrounding myself with that mentality had a very profound impact on me, and was really the thing that led me to change into the person I am today. So I can completely understand how kind of being surrounded by people who can have impact on you, I think, is one of the greatest forces of change for anyone's mindset. You can read a
Yeah.
million books, but if you're not really surrounding yourself with the image of those people, the lifestyle of those people, it's very hard to consume that information and apply it to your life, because it's just information. It's not real influence on you. So I'd love for you to share,
Yeah.
everyone, kind of what happened after that, when your mindset started to shift. Did you notice that it was shifting, and kind of what did you do with that?
It's strange because I would say when I started to put other things on my mind, I was actually in college and I was going to a junior college, and I had dropped out of college because it was easy to quit. I started this cycle of just starting stuff but not finishing and just quitting. And so I met a group of guys who were thinking about joining the military, and but they were talking about joining the National Guard. And so for me, that was positive influence, right? So it wasn't talking about, hey, let's go out to the club, let's go do this. It was something that was positive, and it was something that was life changing. And so for the first time, that started to enter my mind. And
Can I
so
ask you real quick and Jim? So,
yeah.
like, how were they to just to give people who have never talked to people like that? What were those conversations like? What were some of the things they were saying in that positive context?
So it was a conversation that had vision in it, that had goals. So for example, well, one guy wanted to, join the military to get money for school so he could finish his education. Um, Another guy wanted to go to the military so they could use the money to go to trade school and ultimately do a job that they were interested in and could afford the education for. And so that started to put this idea in my head. Hey, um, my ultimate goal is to do what I quit, is to finish what I quit, which was my education. Um, and so maybe this is a way that could serve as the catalyst to get to that. And so that's kind of what the conversation was about. For me, the military came into the picture because I was inspired to finish my education. Um, and so that's kind of how it happened. But the funny thing is, when I made up my mind that the military was going to be the way that I go, um, it started out as the National Guard, and I met up with this National Guard recruiter, and I went down. We took the test, and I went to in process in Memphis, Tennessee, at the Memphis MEPS. And the funny thing that happened, which was on my way out of taking the test, an Army recruiter looked at me twice. It did a double take, and something said to him, "I need to contact this guy." And so what he did was illegal at the time. He he, he slightly tapped me on my hand and slipped me his card. And so, and I took the card, and it put something else on my mind. And I remember having a discussion with my father, and he was like, "Look, I think for you, where you are currently in your life, once you leave home, once you leave the state of Mississippi, you're not going to want to come back." And so I thought about that because joining the National Guard, I had this vision of, well, I'm gonna go, I'm gonna get in shape, and I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna try to play football, and I'm gonna have the money to go to school. That was the goal. That's what my vision was. But after having that conversation with my father, I said, you know what? He's probably right. And that one day of that guy doing something illegal and slipping me that card changed my life, and I decided to go active duty.
Amazing. Okay, so
Yeah,
then take us through what happened next. Where did you start out in the Army? Did you go through a training period for people who aren't familiar with like the process?
yeah,
And where has that journey taken you?
yeah. So once I decided to join the Army, I went through basic training in Fort Benning, Georgia. And at the time, it was an all male basic training camp. I think it still is, but this was pre 9/11. So this was actually next month um, is when I signed the contract. But my first week of basic training was the week of 9/11.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so I remember that morning of being on the confidence tower. It was my time to go across this 90-foot tower. It's a tower to test your fear of heights. And so it's that first test to for you to get over that fear of something. And I remember I was shaking in my boots, and I did not want to go across that confidence tower. But out of nowhere, a drill sergeant yelled, "Hey, get out!" And everybody, you need to form up in formation. And that was the morning of 9/11, my my first week of basic training. And
What were
so,
the emotions then, kind of from initially, what were the emotions of just being in basic training, and then what happened during that morning emotionally as you kind of found out this information of what happened?
so for me, um, making it to basic training was I had in my mind I left home with no clothes and no money, and that was symbolic for leaving it all behind. And I said, I will not. I don't care what happens. I'm not quitting. I'm not going back home. And so everything that I own that reminds me of Mississippi is staying back there. So I really had this ambition, this mindset to no matter what happens, I'm gonna make this work. And
Determined is what.
determined.
Absolutely.
And I had no clue that one of the worst events in American history was about to happen a week later of me being in basic training. So that was an ultimate test of this idea of me saying, I don't care what happens, I'm going to make this work. Uh, and so the emotions that day, naturally, a lot of people were afraid. I mean, because you in the military, people come from all across the world, and
Right.
so there were a lot of people from New York that was a part of my training uh, platoon, and so the leadership at the time was like they had to stop all training and get us all in a group and say, hey, if if you don't want to be here, we need you to step to the back of the formation. This is your opportunity um, to quit, to go home, because going forward, they knew that um, the faith of the nation was about to change, and the military was about to change. So they wanted to weed out early uh, who was committed and who wasn't. And so I had this guy um, from South Carolina. He wanted to go home because he was afraid, and I was afraid, but he needed some inspiration to go home. So he was like, "Look, man, uh, I don't think we should, I don't think we should go forward with this. We have no clue what we're getting into." And I had just met this guy, but he wanted me to join him um, so he could quit. And but he didn't know that he was dealing with someone that was trying to overcome his mentality of quitting. And
Right.
so there was no quit in me, and he didn't quit. So that was my first moment of influence in the military, uh, right there.
Wow,
So
that must have had a pretty profound impact for you to see
yeah,
that, like, your determination affected someone else's their entire life and their mental state. What
yeah.
what did that feel like?
I mean, a moment like that, there's so many emotions involved when you see something so tragic as what happened on 9/11. And so it's kind of hard to put it all in perspective. I mean, there's so many
A,
emotions
a
involved in
mixed
that.
bag of emotions for sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
That's amazing. So then what happened like the next day? What kind of, was there a break while this was all happening, or
yeah,
what happened next?
yeah. So training across all basic training was put at a halt, and so it was there was this kind of national lockdown on every installation. So every post had to go to a 24-hour security lockdown. And so a part of what we did as trainees, we assisted with that lockdown. So for a week, instead of continuing to train, we posted up as security guards until leadership figured out, okay, this is the direction we're going to go with this.
Gotcha.
And
What
so
what were you
yeah,
guarding, or like security guards for what?
just the gate. So every installation has several gates, every several points of entry, and so I think during that time they were unsecured gates, so it was just show your ID and get on post. But they put multiple trainees at every gate just to strengthen the security. So it was
Totally.
nothing too uh, magical, but it was just being out there and learning how to provide security.
And
Yeah.
then kind of after leadership figured out what was going to happen next, did they have some kind of big talk to all you guys, or like what was the process moving forward from that?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of things changed during that time period. The drill sergeants that we had when we first started, they moved them out because these guys were, airborne rangers and infantrymen that they needed to deploy immediately. So there was a shift in personnel from units all across the army, and so they took out the active duty drill sergeants and deployed them immediately to Afghanistan. And they brought in reserve drill sergeants to kind of finish the training cycle for us. But I understood after I graduated basic training that the Army was not the Army that I came into week one. And so units were all across the Army, units were preparing their soldiers to ramp up and go
And
fight.
deploy? Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was in my mindset. And man, that is a difficult mindset to have, to just understand that, look, at some point, all this training will lead to me going to war.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And
That's
so,
that's amazing. So did you notice that your mindset was kind of something that everyone shared, or did you notice kind of like a different did were there different mindsets across the unit that you were basic
yeah.
training with? And how did that affect you?
So the people who you go to basic training with, um, once you leave there may be one or two that go to the same location that you go to. So we all kind of disperse and go to various locations for the next level of training. So my next level of training was in Missouri, and only one guy who was in Georgia with me went to Missouri with me. And so we did see a shift in mindset because um, being in basic training when 9/11 happened, everything was centered around, hey, your mindset has got to be the mindset of a warrior now. And when we got to Missouri, that wasn't the case so much. And so things were a little bit more relaxed. And I spent 5 weeks there. But after leaving there, I came home for a couple weeks to kind of reset and see family and spend time with family. But then I was off to the 101st Airborne Division at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and they had a mission set um, that would soon be deploying people to Iraq. And so I
Did
think
you
it was,
know kind of before you went there, or even before you went home, that you were going to pretty quickly be deployed, or was that something you only found out when you got to the Kentucky Airborne Division?
yeah, I didn't know until I got there.
Okay.
Yeah, I had an idea what was going to happen, but I didn't really know that, 10 months later I would be in the combat zone at 24 years old. I didn't know that. But
All right. So then take us kind of to that part of your journey. What was that like deploying? How was your mindset when you deployed? And kind of did you go through any real struggles in terms of that determination, or was it something that you were able to really hold on to and keep steadfast the whole time?
well, it was a lot of fear initially, and that fear came from uncertainty, unknown. We had no idea what it was like in the Middle East. And during that time, there wasn't a lot of experience, combat experience in the military. The people who were in leadership then, they were either a part of Desert Storm or they had no combat experience whatsoever. So um, going into war and during that time, that was actual war. I mean, it was still declared a war, and we went in toward the middle of it. And so, yeah, there was a lot of fear. Um, and leaving the states and getting to a place that was like extremely hot and dusty and just foreign to everyone. I mean, it was a mixed bag of emotions for sure, uh, and it was, yeah, it's hard to describe because at 24 years old, you never think or you never imagine that you would be in a place where, um, civilization just isn't the same.
Right.
Um,
Well, could
you
you
know,
give a little bit of context on that for people who maybe don't
Mhm.
know a lot about Afghanistan in general, don't know a lot about the war that was going on? What did it physically look like, where you were
Mhm.
deployed, and then also what kind of on a day to day or at least a week to week were your daily activities? What did that look like for you?
So we when we entered the Middle East, we the first country we got to was Kuwait,
Kuwait.
and that was kind of, yeah, that was kind of a hub. So where every unit entered before they went into the combat zone of Iraq. So that was an opportunity for you to, get your equipment that you shipped over there, kind of do some additional training to get your mind right, and everybody in this mindset of, hey, we're going into a battle zone. And so Kuwait is, actually one of the richest countries in the world because of oil, and it is a white collar country. And so seeing Kuwait was kind of like, wow. I mean, they're living really good over here, but the total opposite of Kuwait is Iraq, which was the next country over. So when we crossed the border, coming from this white collar country into a country that's starving, literally, and you saw it from the very moment you crossed the border because kids were, um, you know, asking for food, and people were just walking along the streets, kind of saying, "Hey, we come in peace," and I mean, it was crazy to say the least, but um,
Yeah, I mean that must have been quite an emotional test going from
yeah,
just from what, again, because your environment and your surroundings does have, like, you can't help the effect emotionally and kind of in a mind state that it has on you. That
yeah,
must have been quite difficult to just even have your emotions pulled in to kind of polar opposite directions like that.
yeah. It's kind of like, what am I seeing? Like you're trying to make sense of it because the first thing you see is little kids starving, asking for food. And then the more you travel into Iraq, you start to see stuff on fire, burning cars, burning houses, people walking with white flags. And so the further you traveled into the country, the more and more you saw this stuff. People living in dirt houses. It was just a total culture shock, um, to me, at least. So it's hard to describe because you see so much in combat, and depending on who you talk to, um, will determine the kind of experience they paint for you.
Right.
Because everyone doesn't have the same experience when they deploy. They're not exposed to the same type of activity when they deploy, um, and so for some people it's hard to describe it, and others it's like, well, yeah, I was over there, but you know, nothing to
Yeah. Yeah,
it.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Well, and also just based off like who you were as a person growing up is gonna
Mhm.
determine how you interpret. Like you said, you didn't have really any contextuality around what you
Yeah,
were seeing. So
yeah,
it was kind of left up to your brain to determine like what that meant to see something on
yeah,
fire. And I'm sure some people would see that and be like, even to the point of like, oh, that's kind of cool, like stuff's on
yeah,
fire. And some people
Yeah.
would be like, oh my God, this is terrifying. And other people might feel like, oh my God, these poor people. Like there's so many different emotions that
Yeah.
you could interpret without the context of really knowing so much what's going on. Because it sounded like, or it sounds like that you guys were pretty much thrust into it without a whole lot of
Yeah.
like explanation as to really what's going on, other than like, this is a war zone, you guys are warriors, this is your job, but not really
Yeah.
like about what these other people are experiencing or were going through, probably because they didn't know either. And
Yeah.
so I can imagine that also led to some level of fear in terms of not really knowing like the things you were looking at, and not having that sense
Yeah.
of certainty.
Yeah, absolutely. Because at this point, we have no clue who the enemy is. Like all we see right now is, starving kids, people who need help. And, to this day, I don't know if that was done intentionally because they know, Americans got a soft heart for
Right.
stuff like that, or they were legitimately starving. Like to this day, I don't know that. And depending on who you talk to, they may tell you that, hey, yeah, I think they were intentionally doing that just to get us to drop our guards. Um, so you see all kind of stuff um, when you're at war. I mean, and this is 1 month into it. We still have 11 months to go, and so
Yeah.
it's as the war kind of tapered off and the war ended and it became an operation. Then you started to see who the enemy was, and so that's where you probably heard of these, IED big bombs exploding. That's when they started to surface. And so it kind of got to this point where I think they were tired of seeing American presence in their country. And so they wanted to do whatever to disturb that, to disrupt that. And that became very dangerous for those that were out on the highways, like I was, and the rest of my team. So, but just think about, coming from this small town, having gone through the adversity as a young kid, as a 17-year-old kid, to this dramatic lifestyle now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's dramatic, and I would say, having gone through the emotions of, dropping out of high school and continuing to self-destruct, it prepared me to deal with such a dramatic lifestyle that the military gave me.
So almost, are you kind of saying like you'd already been through the depths of your emotions kind of
Yeah,
previously, and so like even though it was very hard, you'd almost in a sense been there emotionally already, and so had
right,
some preparation for how to deal with it.
right, right. So, yeah, looking back on it, I think so. I think that's the best way to analyze that, uh, because, like I said, there's been many profound moments in my life, and any service member that have served a long career like I have, or even longer, because people serve much longer than I have. They've been through so many defining moments, but depending on who you are will determine when that first defining moment happened in your life. And so for me, it happened very young. Adversity hit, I continued to fail, and then I figured out a way to overcome that failure. And so by the time I got in the military, my mindset was already sharp and built for
Yeah, yeah.
continued
To
adversity.
people watching that, I would almost equate that, and I can resonate with that. It's once you've been to the depths of your dark place and overcome it, you almost can never go back to the quitting. Like you can't allow
Right.
yourself to go back
Yeah.
anymore, and because you know that you can overcome. And so
Yeah.
whatever comes your way, as much pain as there might be, there's just this piece of you that knows that you can get through it, and that never dies in you. So I think
Right.
that's really profound. What are some of the things that made you want to continue in the service past, your first tour, your second tour, and then also what are some of the things that you really took away the most from those experiences? I'm sure there were a lot of profound moments and kind of profound experiences,
Hmm.
but looking back on it now, what do you think are the major things that kind of either made you into the person you are today, or that just really stuck with you?
So I would say for anyone that enters the military, it probably takes 2 to 3 years before you can develop this mentality of, okay, I'm committed to this. I'm a professional soldier. I understand what I need to do to be successful, and I'm committed to doing that. So I would say after the third year, um, the influence came from this. I saw an ability to impact people. Um, because it was a lack of impact from the people who were important to me when I was in high school that created this compassion to impact others, if that makes sense.
So
Um,
much, yes. I think a driving force for myself is I want to be the person that was never there for me, and I
right,
kind of
right,
it's something that's so deep a part of you, especially once you overcome that thing that you realize if people had been there for me and I had to get through it on my own, now I
right.
want to be that person there for those other people. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So, people come from all over the world to serve our country, and with that, you learn so much about uh, people. The military is a people business. It's all about the people. I mean, there's a mission, there's a timeline of when you got to get the mission done, but uh, it's the people who get the mission done. And so leaders have to develop an understanding of how to take care of people. And so for me, that was right up my alley because people was important to me. I have, you know, my journey created empathy, created compassion. And so to have someone that needs a maybe a positive influence in their life, I'm more than willing to do that, or just to have someone to talk to. So the military served gave me a platform to impact people, and that has carried me for 19 years now.
That's
So
amazing. And that makes so much sense. It's basically the place where you found your calling, and
yeah,
where you got to execute your calling and your strengths and your purpose. So that's beautiful. And thank you so much for being the person that you are and being committed to helping others in such a profound way. I know quite a lot of military members who the military was the thing that saved their life. The thing that
hmm,
changed them to become the person that they respect in themselves, the person that they want to be because of amazing leaders, I think like yourself, and the impact that they had on them when their life, a lot of people enter the military in kind of chaos. They go into the
yeah,
military because they're really their life isn't in order and they know that the military can deliver this sense of order to them. And so I
yeah,
think that's a beautiful thing that you're able to not only kind of do that, but here on this platform, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on YouTube, be able to share that with others as a beautiful thing that the military does. It's not just about going to war, it's
right,
about people, it's about impacting people in a profoundly positive way that gives them hope, that gives them courage, and that gives them a sense of self. So I
yeah.
commend you for that, and I thank you for that.
Oh,
Throughout
thank you.
your tours, and starting your family, talk a little bit about that. How did you end up meeting your wife? And
Yeah,
what was that like, kind of having a relationship that you're committed to, but also having the military that you're committed to?
right. And that's it's crazy to bring that up because having a family and a military career, it is very tough, if not impossible, to find a balance, right? To balance career and family, because the military consumes so much of your life. I mean, it's literally a 24/7 job, um, because you have to be available to the people you serve always. If the phone rings at 2 o'clock in the morning, you got to answer it because it could be someone that maybe in some kind of domestic dispute or just have gotten into trouble. So there's no clocking out. you're always
You're all
available,
in. Yeah.
all in. And my wife, she's actually a veteran herself, and so we met in the military, and we went on our first deployment together. We were not married at the time, but we were in a committed relationship, and it became more committed while deployed. And we came back and we got married, and we had a daughter, and we've had another daughter, and and so we've been married for 16 years now, and so we have a connection. Here's the thing about this is a totally different topic, but you don't know um, who you're involved with until you've seen them at their worst, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And so I got a chance to see my wife at her worst before she became my wife, and seeing her at her worst really showed me the kind of person she really was. Because, and so I said, that's the kind of person I want in my life. And so we got married, and I'm sure some thought it wouldn't last this long, but it has, and we're still going strong, and I hope we continue to go strong. So yeah, we have that connection
No, I love that.
through
I
service.
can resonate with that too. Me and my husband married quite early when I was 19 and he's 4 years older when he was 23. And I think it was
Mm.
before we had any recollection of really who either of us truly was, but also certainly hadn't spent enough time or been in enough circumstances to see the full tilt of how we would act in different situations. And then we went through
Right.
kind of this gas explosion that we survived, and then got thrust into homelessness, and definitely got to see each other
Mm.
at our worst, where our emotions were,
Yeah.
you know, awful, experiencing awful
Yeah.
emotions, and had really no idea of how to deal with them in a constructive way. And seeing that and still loving someone and still wanting them and still wanting them to be a part of your life and still being committed to them.
Yeah.
Now there's nothing that could hit us or we could go through that would, either of us knows we are committed, we are wanting to work towards a mutual goal. And so I can really resonate with that, seeing someone at their worst, and that being the point of knowing that this
Yeah.
is the person for me. I think that's
Yeah.
really cool to share with people. So I
Yep.
want to wrap things up a little bit. I feel like I could talk to you forever. You're a wealth of
Yeah.
not only knowledge and experience, but like really perspective. Um, what moving forward out of like, when was your last tour, and kind of
Mm.
what has military life for you been like since then?
So my last tour was in 2014, and it was in Afghanistan, and I would say that was probably um, not the most significant, but it was probably the most difficult one because my level of responsibility had risen greatly, and so it was, I had about 22 people. Well, it was 22 people that, I was responsible for, their whole life, and I had this idea that the way that I took them over there is the same way I wanted to bring them back. So that's a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, a lot of sleepless nights, and so I would say that was the toughest. And and after that, I went to Korea, South Korea for a year, where I went without my family. And since then, I've been I've had a kind of a privileged career because I have this job that allows me to give back. Impact is the most important thing to me. So being in an institutional training environment, which is where I am now, um, I'm able to give back through the platform of a leadership course or a leadership development course. And so every day it's about impact, and and that's what gives me up in the morning. Still being able to impact people in a positive way, and so since that last deployment, it's been great. and it's probably the reason why I'm still holding on after 19 years. But there's so much uh, I want to do in life because I'm still young, and so I've decided to end it at 20 years, and and just see where I can take this ambition to impact people. Um, just see where I can go with that.
That's
And
amazing. One
yeah.
kind of last question would be, I'm certain that you've gone through a lot of pain and a lot of kind of
Mhm.
difficult circumstances during those deployments. Do you think, and this is something based off kind of my own experiences, do you think that as awful as some of that pain was, that it has really greatly added to your ability now while you're in this impact leadership role and teaching role?
Mhm.
Like, do you think that that pain is directly related to some of the value that you're able to deliver now?
Absolutely. I think anyone that goes through pain or any type of stress or just adversity, there, there's there's strength on the other side of it, right? And so the more you go through pain, the stronger you become. Now, what's great about that is if you can find a way to take that strength and use it to help other people. And so for so long, um, I was embarrassed about what happened to me in high school, and I never shared it with anyone. I just used it to drive me. I used the lack of once having taken education lightly to drive my passion to grad school, and ultimately, I'll pursue a PhD. But I decided that I'm on the other side of it now. I'm on the other side of that pain, and if it can serve as a driving force for me, what can it do for someone else? And so that's why we're here now. And I hope it. I've shared this story with two other people on this type of platform, but if it just resonates with one person, um, that's enough for me.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And I would encourage anyone right now who's going through a stressful time, a painful time, a time where they're struggling, to kind of keep that in mind. I hope that you can see this amazing example of a man and a human being, to realize that as much as that pain sucks, as much as that stress and that struggle sucks, if you can find the strength on the other side, it is not only going to benefit you, but you're going to be able to change the lives of so many people that you interact with and touch, and it will feel worth it. It will feel rewarding in ways that you can't even imagine.
Yeah,
um, and life is hard. Life will always be hard. It will never be easy continuously, and if we're willing to deal with and overcome those struggles and those pains and those stresses that we deal with, there is such a great reward on the other side that I think makes life what worth living in just deep, amazingly fulfilling ways. So I thank you so much for being here and sharing all of this, story, all of this experience, all of your knowledge and information with everyone. If people did want to get in touch with you, what would be the best way for them to reach out to you?
you can reach me on Facebook. Just look up my name, Keith Tillman, on Facebook. If you want to reach me through email, you can reach me at Gmail, keith.tillman14@gmail.com, or just connect with me here on LinkedIn, and we can chat it up like we did tonight.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you guys all for watching. Oh, I see you, Eric King. Eric King is another guest who did, I believe it was 17 years in the military service, who has actually started up a really
Mm,
cool app to help veterans who are transitioning back into military life. You guys might be a good two
that's
to
awesome.
kind of connect and chat it up a little bit. I'm sure you'd have some fun stories to share. But thank you so
Yeah,
much
let's
for your
connect.
service. Thank you for your time. And you guys, please reach out to Keith if you're thinking about military service or it's something that you're passionate about and interested in, because he's a wealth of information and can give you a little bit perspective, and I'm sure some advice as well. Thank you guys so much. Have an amazing Friday night. Enjoy some time with your families, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.